Hi, friends. Day 62 of A Path of Purpose. And um, today, let's talk a little bit about boundaries. So, earlier today, I had a conversation with a friend who's been recently in a little study with some other ladies, and they've been doing the workbook and the book Boundaries by McLeod and Townsend. And it was several years ago that this book was written that I was first exposed to the book. But as we were talking today, I realized that it might be a good book to pick up again. So I did put a link here for you because sometimes it's just nice to have a book, a hands-on book to touch, to feel, to underline, to just be able to process with. But more times than not, when I prefer using Audible while I'm driving and listening to books then, or when I'm taking a walk. So anyway, so let's talk about boundaries. So I'll tell you a story. I really didn't understand boundaries at all. And I remember years ago, it just seemed like whenever a family member called me, and maybe I've shared this before, but whenever a particular family member would call me, I would end up in tears and they would be maybe blaming me for something or just unhappy with me and scolding me. And one time I got off the phone and someone said to me, Shar, you do know that that's not normal. You do know that for someone to sit and ridicule you and scold you over the phone is not appropriate. And I thought, wow, I did not understand that. And so I went to a friend who was mentoring me at the time, and we started talking about it. And it's basically what I had grown up with and didn't understand what was appropriate in relationships and inappropriate. And so I realized that when this family member would start scolding me on the phone, it would be best if I said, well, obviously we don't have, it's not the best time to talk, and so we can talk another time. And so I remember when I did that for the first time, and I said, well, obviously we need to talk about this later, or I said it'd be better if we ended our conversation and talked later. I don't even remember how I said it right now because it was so many years ago. But I remember, graciously saying goodbye and hanging up. And for the first time, I felt freedom in that scenario because I was no longer a victim, that I made a choice to remove myself from that inappropriate conversation, right? Because I was just literally being beat up over the phone over something that I don't even remember what it was about, but it was pretty common event in phone conversations with this person. And so that was the beginning of understanding how we place boundaries in our life and in our relationships. And isn't it interesting, though, that I didn't even know until somebody pointed it out to me that was abnormal, because that's all I knew in this particular relationship. So we oftentimes don't even know what's toxic. And so we just have to stop and think, am I feeling loved? Am I feeling valued? Is the conversation a two-way conversation? Is there respect and appreciation for each other? in the conversation? Because if there isn't, I would stop and say, is this conversation healthy? And is it the best conversation to be in right now? And that's where boundaries begin, is realizing that, again, we have talked about this, right? We've talked about making choice. We just talked about making choice with submitting, right? We choose. And so, so with boundaries affect every area of our life. And boundaries aren't just in relationships. They're in time, they're in finances, it's that whole person where we need to create boundaries. Now, is it easy to go outside those boundaries? Definitely. We get into this vicious cycle, and sometimes we don't know how to stop, right? Stop. And so, boundaries. Yeah, boundaries. So, taking time to recognize where you need to make boundaries. So, I shared with you guys back in November that I chose to stop eating and going through drive-thrus and eating fast food. Well, that was a new boundary I put up for myself. And so now when I'm hungry, I'm in a hurry, I'm stressed, and I'm driving by, fast food, it's so great because I already made that choice. I don't have to make that choice. I don't have to make that boundary again every time I drive by one. I just can remind myself, no, you are not eating fast food. You are not stopping and driving through fast food. And I've set that boundary. Well, it was so funny the other day. I was sharing with somebody that I hadn't been through a drive-through. So all in November, December, January, February. So I haven't been through a drive-through in 4 months. And my first motivation was to save money, because I had heard on a Instagram that people will spend a minimum of $1,500 a year just going through fast food. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous, right? I don't want to spend money on fast food, $1,500 on fast food. And so then the other day I mentioned that I hadn't gone through fast food. And they said, no, you don't go drive through fast food anymore. You just pull up and park and walk in. And I said, funny. But actually I have not. So creating those boundaries has been a positive result in my life. Not only weight loss, but financial benefit, because I'm not spending that extra money. I'm spending the money going to the grocery store and actually purchasing food to eat, right? To prepare, to cook, anyway. So what are the boundaries in your life you need to look at? Do you have healthy relationships? Are your boundaries giving you value and giving you the ability to choose a healthy and prosperous life, right? Where you're enjoying what you're doing and you're loving the relationships and your disciplines that you've created. So it all kind of interconnects, you guys. Everything that we talk about, it kind of just starts weaving together, right? And boundaries is definitely one of those. And so just think about your boundaries and realize that if you have those relationships where you feel attacked, that you can remove yourself from that conversation. You don't need to stay in the conversation. You can step away and you can be gracious. You don't have to be reactionary, right? You don't need to react, but you can respond with graciousness. So, all right, you guys, I'm glad we talked about boundaries today, and I would click on that link. You can get inexpensive books at thrift books. I don't advertise for people, but if you want a hands-on book, thrift books is great, and it's probably on Audible too. I didn't look, but because it's been so many years ago since I read it. But anyway, it's a book that comes with that you can also purchase a workbook with that might be beneficial for you. All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a great rest of the day.